Hi, folks. So, I must have, honestly, I must have the, no one has weirder hair than I do. I try to like get it to be in some sort of shape, but this is what I give up. So I apologize for my appearance. I have tried to tame my hair and put it into some sort of shape, but it just looks ridiculous. And I assure you, it looked even more ridiculous than a few minutes ago. It did look anyway. You know what? Let's carry on with this video, shall we? Because I'm eager to get done with this video. Because as I mentioned in my last video, this is the second of two videos that I feel like I wanted to get out there that is related to just the recent videos I've done in the past, specifically Saturn going direct in Pisces, and that's the one that this video really is pointing to, and also the New Moon and Scorpio videos that I did. So this is the second of these kind of short videos that I wanted to do just to add to expound on, to bring home certain points that I'd made in these last few videos, and you can refer back to those two videos. I'll place links to them at the end of this particular video. And then after this video is done, I can carry on with our regular programming and go back to that Venus through Libra transit video that I have wanted to do, and start to talk about the upcoming transits in Sagittarius that we should all be looking forward to as well. So with this particular video, I wanted to talk briefly about, I had touched on in the New Moon and Scorpio video, we sort of gone off on a tangent on love versus desire. And in the Saturn video, especially the Saturn going direct video, talked about what it means to be effective and taking effective action. Now, I realize that I am an astrologer, and this is precisely, I have to say that I really do not consider myself any sort of spiritual advisor. And these days, everybody is a spiritual advisor. All you have to do is go on social media, and now that it's so easy to have our own channels and to self-publish or to write, everyone, and it is not lost on me also that sort of the whole kind of spiritual industry is a lucrative industry, and a couple of things about it, of course, make me a little uneasy. One that I feel like a lot that is being said has been said before, and been said well and more effectively, especially when we go back to sort of ancient texts, etc. And as I said, these days everybody is a spiritual advisor. The other thing that really makes me uneasy is that people who sort of have conventionally good resumes, that means that they may have achieved a certain type of success or have a certain type of bank balance, seem to justify that by virtue of being somehow spiritually aligned in some way, as though they're sort of favored. And that makes me uneasy as well. Oh, the reason why so and so must have so much money, or the reason why so and so must be successful, is because they must be so aligned. Now, and all of this is a way to say, just to state very, very clearly, is that I in no way feel like I'm any sort of qualified spiritual advisor, and I enjoy very much what I do, but I see that as interpreting symbols and transits as effectively as I can, and I am consistently amazed by the fact that there can be any correlation by what is going on down here or in the 3D, and any relationship that it might have to where a planet might be in the nighttime or daytime sky. So I've said before that I consider myself a skeptical astrologer, but that doesn't mean that I don't take the practice seriously and don't enjoy it. In my case, when you have such a heavy emphasis on either the ninth house or important planets in the sign of Sagittarius, there's a propensity in the chart, there's an inclination, there's growth in the chart in spiritual matters, so to speak, or things like astrology, or connection to source, or connection to spirit, or non-mundane kind of information. And so I lean into it, and the more I lean into it, the more. But that doesn't mean that whatever it is that I'm able to say when I'm reading a chart or interpret is something that I can always apply effectively as I navigate my own life. So the fact that I can expound and talk seemingly wisely about certain things does not mean that I might be able to see what is going on in my own chart, and I may not be able to take advantage of, or a knack for something, a propensity for something. Following the right path does not make someone a completely evolved human being, is what I'm trying to say. So this is, I'm touching on a couple of things that I'm very clear have astrological meaning, insofar as especially they support the planet Saturn and what Saturn enables us and tries to get us to do. But I'm a little uncomfortable about this video just because I don't want to come across as some sort of sage, which I don't believe I am at all. And I would advise anyone. The other thing about the spiritual side of things and the spiritual sort of community and especially the industry that makes me uneasy is that so much that people seem to want to manifest is, you know, our dream car or our dream life or our dream home or our dream bank balance. And you know, it makes me scratch my head sometimes when I you know, all while there are people within a 5-mile radius who might be homeless, or even generally may not have access to clean drinking water or plumbing, or, you know, homes, or maybe hungry, or I don't quite get why people are unable. Now that doesn't mean, again, that we should not satisfy ourselves, but there's something to a certain aspect of the industry of spirituality. Like I say, the one thing that you can rely on a human being to do is justify just about anything. So I think a healthy skepticism and just because you win an award doesn't mean that you are spiritual, you know. And so much depends, you know. If you have a North Node in Capricorn or important placements as Capricorn or Taurus, then I say go for it, manifest the wealth and climb the ladder and get the titles and all that kind. It's part of what you're here to try and do. But I'm talking more about espousing principles and stuff like that. So I say that as a disclaimer 7 minutes into this video. And now let me dive into the couple of things that I wanted to talk about. I mentioned two things. One, of course, was this idea of the distinction between love and desire. With Saturn, and Saturn going direct or retrograde, and the impact of a retrograde or a direct Saturn transit on your chart, depending on whether you have Saturn or direct retrograde, Saturn direct or retrograde in your natal chart. That was what we were talking about 2 or 3 videos ago. And as I said, I'll place a link to that video. And that's really the video that this video is talking to. But when I did the New Moon in Scorpio video, because we were talking about considered action, we were talking about Mars, there was also a conversation between doing something for the love of, you know, choosing love over desire, so to speak. Now, it's the love desire bit that is easier to talk about right up front. When we pursue something emotionally, or when we have emotions about something or someone, it's not a question of distinction all the time, because you can experience different emotions towards something or someone. You can have feelings of love towards someone, and anger towards someone, and desire towards someone. What this all boils down to is this idea of effective action, and in Saturn's case, an awareness of cause and effect. When I was thinking about what I was saying, I can't help but boil it down to what I think of the Buddhist principle and the sort of eightfold path of right intention and right action. And Saturn ultimately is here to steady us and teach us about what the right action in any given circumstance is. And the right action has to be motivated by the right intention. One of the things I find in myself, but because of the work that I do and the charts that I read, is that one of the again, this is an ancient spiritual truth. This is not my wisdom, but I find that there's truth to this, which is doing something that falls under the realm of desire creates a kind of attachment and a hunger and a desire for a specific outcome that can lead to a kind of control that inevitably leads to unhappiness or dissatisfaction or sadness or anger or negative emotions. Whereas taking a step back and choosing a more loving approach, and one might say being clear about what we have a claim to and what we don't have a claim to, allowing others to be who they are. Again, easier said than done, no question. But the idea here ultimately, from a Saturnian perspective, is what is the right action? And I realize that when I use terms like effective versus right, it can be a little confusing, especially because it can make it seem like an effective action is somehow manipulative by nature. Because if I did the right thing and if I was completely honest and completely in my integrity and said what I wanted to say, and even if it was seemed a little harsh or whatever it is, then I would be right and it would be non-manipulative. Whereas if I was aiming to be effective, which would be to choose to manage a situation, it would somehow make me manipulative. I think that there's a fine line between considerate, most importantly thoughtful, and manipulative. I think it's one of these things from a Saturnian perspective that you can be right about something, but if you're as right as you are, if you're going to walk in somewhere and someone has been causing it to delay, but they're the ones who are going to sign a particular paper that's going to get you your passport, and you go in there and you throw a big tantrum, however right you might be, the consequence of that might be that you annoy someone so that they create a delay. You know, it's one of those, and again, you may be right, they may be totally wrong, but it's not so much a question of right, and it's a question of have you thought through the consequences of this particular action. In ancient terms, it's so interesting because so many talking about, you know, human beings trying to justify just about anything or any choice or any decision. There's of course the ancient Hindu text, the Bhagavad Gita, and it's, you know, there's so much in that text about doing one's sacred duty and doing it effectively and doing it with no attachment to the outcome, doing it with a pure intention with no attachment to the outcome. However, we can't miss that ultimately what Arjuna is asking Krishna about is, these are my teachers, this is my family, these are my cousins, these are my relatives, these are the people I grew up with. I'm at war with them. I can't kill them. It can't be right to kill them. And of course, Krishna, God, says, no, you have to kill them. You have to do your duty. And it amuses me so much when the Gita is used in more sort of conservative circles as, you know, you must do your duty, and your duty is to always be obedient or always be, whereas ultimately the advice that is being given is quite disobedient. Is quite revolutionary, you know, in a sense, placed within a culture where hierarchy and respect for one's elders and respect and protection of one's family is sort of paramount. And here it is that God is basically saying, you know, sorry, but they gotta go. You know, they've mistreated you, and this is a question. So the whole question of what is right and what is effective, and that's the other thing that particular text expounds on, which is hard to know, you know, hard to know what's right. The final analysis of things, by the time you scale things back, and by the time you figure out causality, and by the time you figure out who did what, when, and to whom, and where did this go wrong, and how did you make this worse, and how did they make this worse, and all that kind of stuff. You know, just let Spirit of God figure this out. You show up there and you try and be as clean as possible and be as effective as you can, and do what you got to do, and let the rest sort of take care of itself. Some people may choose to argue with my interpretation, but I'm going to stand by. I would love to know exactly how it is that they would negate that. At the end of the day, it's undeniable that Krishna basically advises Arjuna to kill his family and not make peace with them. Now, once again, I say these kinds of things, and of course you're talking on YouTube, and please know that I'm giving this as an example and talking about what is right action and effective action, and text about this. I'm not inviting or encouraging any form of violence towards anybody. Please be clear about that. The issue at hand is I like the kind of English translation, the commonly held translation of the Buddhist principle of the Eightfold Path. The right intention, the right action. And making a distinction there between being right, acting out of hunger or desire, or a desire for a particular outcome, or as opposed to be cliched love. But to me, then, it's really about being clear within ourselves. And, sometimes the intention can be to protect ourselves. Sometimes the intention can be to love ourselves over somebody else. Sometimes the intention can be to draw a boundary. Sometimes the intention can be, and someone might quibble with that, particularly the person or situation against whom you're drawing a boundary might say, well, that's not the most loving thing you could do. The most loving thing you could do is say yes to me, or the most loving thing you could do is this or that. Ultimately, it falls on our judgment. But with Saturn, and even with Mars, especially with Mars, one might argue, with both Mars and Saturn, the two malefics, by the way, in ancient astrology, the two negative planets, Mars, the planet of in its negative form, sort of violent action. And Saturn, considered a planet of misfortune and restriction and difficulty and challenge. I think the solution has to be to take a step back from any situation, evaluate what you want out of it. Try to distinguish how invested you are in a particular outcome and how much desire for something is running the show. I think it helps to be clear that kind of maniacal desire or wanting, even however justified you might feel, anything that you feel you need immediately or soon or quickly, or with a sense of urgency to satisfy yourself, I would say needs to be looked at. Desire of a certain type in and of itself, insofar as it's a calling or a call within us, or a wanting or a rightness, surely in the best way that the North Node indicates, is tremendously important, but I almost prefer the word calling for that than I do desire. I think you know what I mean by a certain kind of maniacal desire, where we're not getting what we want and we're really looking forward to something and we want to have it. And I think that my warning or my concern for both myself and for everybody is that once that starts to operate, I rarely see that if actions are taken from that place, I rarely see them leading to a positive or a satisfactory outcome. It's also this other principle, and now we talk about Venus and the Venusian principle of being in the flow. If you want to have a child come play with you or an animal come play with you, it might actually be better to sit quietly and peacefully and be in your best possible energy, and chances that they will come and play with you. But if you want them to play with you, or you really want that kitten or that cat or that dog or whatever it is, and you start to chase after it or go after it kind of with a certain kind of intensity, it's just as likely to run away from you and make you chase after it. In sort of the law of attraction circles, which, you probably gathered in the first 7 minutes of this video, I have my concerns about, how many conferences do people need to go to, and how many cruise ships do they need to attend, and how many, by all means, if that's your thing, do it. But at some point, you've got to take a step back and see if something's actually leading to something or not. And what is it that you're trying to manifest? If it's something that you're called upon to do, if it's North Node related, surely just taking the right action is a significant part of the solution. But at the same time, when it comes to, the thing that I like about, was one of the things that's discussed in those circles, is this idea of holding yourself, of craving something, of wanting something, and that creates an energy of lack, and creates an energy of us placing what we want somehow above. The vibration is not right for us to be able to receive it. And what does it mean to receive something? What does it mean to allow? Again, here, I would lean more on something like the Tao Te Ching. There are a couple of wonderful translations out there that encourage being and non-action, action through non-action when the time is right, to not add to the chaos of the world, but sometimes it's non-action that can, and again, it's a difficult to explain what that principle is. It's a feeling. It's not grasping. It's not running after something. It's not getting frustrated with someone. It's not, that kind of, surely that's not, I've never known that space. I've never known acting from that space to produce a desired result. What I do see working as I look at the astrological archetypes, and I see it in myself, in my life, and I see it in the lives of the people whose charts I read, is that allowing, really understanding who has agency in a particular situation, how to be effective, what is the right intention, what is the right action. If you want something to go a certain way and it is not in your control, whose control is it in? Who has the agency in the situation? Who can allow for something to happen or not happen? And what is the best thing you can do to make the positivity of your intention clear? And then stand back and let them respond. And then take it from there. And no is not a dirty word. I can't tell you how many times not getting something has proved to be an enormous blessing. And not only that, no is not a dirty word, because this is the other interesting thing that I see a lot in the spiritual community. A lot of people who I see are so interested in setting up boundaries or saying no to people, don't react quite the same way when someone else sets up a boundary against them or says no to them. No is not a dirty word, because we want our no's to be respected. Just as it might be kind of jarring to hear someone else give a no to us. It becomes so important to read a situation so that we don't lose contact with that center. This idea of returning to ourselves, being in the flow, playing with the energies of the universe, being a creator or a manifester. I can't believe I'm using that word. I think a lot of that effectively has a lot to just do with kind of almost a kind of Tai Chi with the energies. Receiving, playing with them, coming back to the right intention, coming back to the right type of action. So when in the last few videos I've talked about, I just felt like they kind of went off on tangents and may have seemed a little bit moralistic and a little bit judgmental. And I thought, let me just do a video where I can put down my thoughts on these topics based on what I observe for myself and for others. Make it perfectly clear that you are not required to follow, I'm no I really kind of have an issue with just how many people sort of can be found on YouTube and Instagram and as though, I mean, God is whispering in their ear all the time. It's astonishing, and disturbing. And anyway, so it's not coming from, but insofar as we're talking about astrology, insofar as we're talking about Saturn, insofar as we're talking about a new moon that is conjunct Mars, insofar as we're talking about Mars and the Sun being in conversation and coming together on the 17th to the 18th of November, and us talking about considered and aligned action as a result of this conjunction in the sign of Scorpio. As much as we're talking about the fact that the second half of this year has been so eclipsy, not just an eclipse season, with Venus retrograde, Mercury retrograde, the new moon in Leo in August, trying the North Node, setting a direction for us in the middle of these retrogrades practically. The new moon in Virgo providing a period of stationary non-action because it was disposited and ruled by a stationary Mercury. The eclipse in Libra in the middle of October starting to provide a certain amount of action. But this new moon in Scorpio especially, you know, we've had hardly any, as much of a change agent kind of second half of 2023 has been, laced with change, promising change, creating change. It's been a surprisingly non-galloping, non-fast moving energy at the same time. Because we rarely, I mean, the new moon in Scorpio is, you know, one of the lunations, as I said, till December the 10th or so. By all means, try and move forward and create what you can. But again, it's conjunct a combust Mars, you know. Then the new moon in Sagittarius happens in the middle of December. But guess what? 3 days after that, Mercury goes retrograde. There's no question that the new moon in Scorpio and the lunation that we are under is a time for considered action. But it is also a time when we're dealing with considered action where we're going to need to take certain steps in the direction, as I've said, that we want to move forward in. And we're going to have to wait for the universe to respond. And for the pieces to fall into place. We're taking over from the eclipses, and it's not gallop time. So whether on a more mundane level we're talking about aligned action and considered action, or whether from an overall Saturnian perspective, and that is a principle that is running our lives all the time. I just wanted to put my thoughts here around, really make clear what I mean by being careful of making sure that you're acting from love. Now, that could be, in certain cases, love for yourself or love for others. It could be love for others. It could be love, again, is a tricky word. I would say maybe it's best to just come back to that idea of right intention and right action. And from a Saturnian perspective, really thinking about, well, if I do this, what is the likeliest reaction? Wise, mature decisions. Sensible decisions. Sensible actions. And yes, they might have, you know, we all have to sit in the middle. You know, it's so interesting to me, the Western chart being a circle and these opposing principles sitting in opposing houses. The first hand, you, the seventh house, the other. The second house, your income and your sense of self-worth. The eighth house, codependency and resources shared with others. The third house, fitting in your immediate environment and mundane communication and skill acquisition. The ninth house, hermit-like behavior in some ways, communing with spirit. The fourth house, the private. The 10th house, the public. The fifth house, you, your individuality, your creativeness, your passions. The 11th house, the collective. The 6th house, the busiest part of the chart. I mean, my God, talking about taking action and controlling action, and the 12th house, the least busy part of the chart, and letting go and letting God, so to speak. On some level, on a day-to-day basis, when it comes to we've got to integrate these energies. We've got to stand in the center of the chart and kind of stand in the middle of that seesaw and be able to determine which way we go. Now, as an astrologer, I will tell you that we're not meant to. We're meant to lean into and give weight to where the planets are in our chart. So if I have the Sun and Neptune and the North Node in Sagittarius and Mars and Chiron in the 9th house, it is not a lifetime to be third housey or Geminian. So I don't need to stand in the middle of that seesaw. I've got to lean in the direction that these planets are encouraging me to lean in. How astrology sort of came into my life and has taken on a life of its own. So in the execution and the living of our lives and taking on of our personalities and following our calling, it's not a matter of standing in the middle of the seesaw. There, it's a matter of understanding where your planets are and what they're encouraging you to experience in this lifetime and leaning into that. There are houses that we're meant to lean into, and there are houses we're meant to stay away from. But when it comes to weighing decisions and actions, it goes back to that idea of being right versus being effective and the slight unease of manipulativeness entering the idea of being effective. And I would replace that with, as I said, thoughtfulness. I'm going to wrap this up. I hope that those distinctions are clear. I hope that the one thing that I'm able to at least express is my concern for anyone or any situation where actions are being taken out of. If you find yourself getting, especially astrologically at times like these, especially at a time when we have all these, remember that video I did very recently about the fact that we have all these oppositions going on. Last week of November, we're going to have Venus opposing Chiron and conjuncting the South Node, therefore opposing the North Node. Venus is then going to go into Scorpio, and she's going to oppose Jupiter and Uranus. So in the middle of these oppositions and these perceived threats and these slowdowns and the faster moving planets needing to serve the, if you find yourself getting into a place where, and after all, isn't this what when people say, don't be in resistance, accept the present moment, really what we're saying is just make sure that your desires and your desire for a particular outcome isn't driving you so crazy that you're resisting what is in front of you, because you're going to have to work that much harder to. So if you find yourself getting to a place where situations and people and outcomes are starting to get your goat in such a way that, however right you might feel is starting to drive you crazy, just pause for a moment and see if you're acting from a place of this kind of desire and control and hunger for something. And as I said, just, if you don't want to take my word for it, just see, whether it is for a person or a situation, whatever it is, just kind of, I've never seen that be successful. I've never seen that lead to a healthy or a positive outcome or a satisfactory outcome. Whereas taking the time to take a step back and really think about the right intention and therefore the right action from there, an appropriate expression, understanding what you have control over and what you don't, what is in your domain and what is not in your domain, what is a decision for you to make and what is a decision for someone else to make. How can we express what it is that we're able to offer in a particular situation, and then leave it to the people who are actually in control of that particular outcome to determine whether they want to take us up on our offer or not, whether it's for a job interview or a romantic situation or something you want from a family member or whatever that is. And again, I would invite you to at least lean into and also explore this principle of being. I was going to say attracting versus chasing, but again, attracting introduces that element of desire to it. I would just say being. I kind of like, in the law of attraction circle, I like this idea of raising our vibrations. Trying to be peaceful, trying to be aligned, trying to be Venusian. Not in a manipulative way, because Venus also, all the planets have their shadow sides, right? If Mars's shadow side is aggression, Venus's shadow side is manipulation. But there's something interesting about this idea of being in a certain frequency so that you're likelier to so that whatever it is that you want kind of wants to partner with you, as opposed to feels like they need to be kind of wary of you or are very clear about what outcome it is that you want. With Saturn, it is a question of cause and effect and karma. And intention is very important. And the right action is very important. And every action with Saturn will have a consequence. And we talked about this in the Saturn video to some extent as well. Anything that we do or do not do comes at a price. It can be really fun to think about this in some ways. When it comes to considered action, you know, it's in some ways the new moon in Scorpio is a really great, introduces a really great kind of 20-odd day period till December 12th or so, where we actually do have the ability to not be under the sway of a reckless Mars, of a galloping Mars, but actually have the opportunity to rein in our actions so that whatever actions we take are considered, are aligned, don't have to be, and count, and are moving towards a constructive outcome that we want to build. And we take the action and we see how Spirit responds. Okay, I'm not going to expound on any of this anymore. Thank you for this unusually philosophical, watching this unusual, you know, those of you who watch my channel, that I am strictly astrological. But both these things got said in the last 3 or 4 videos, and I was just like, I feel incomplete, and I don't know that I've made myself completely clear. And many of you might feel like, Abhi, you did not need to say any of this. So thank you for listening to it. Next video about Venus' transit in Libra. We'll be back on track. If you found the video useful, feel free to share, tell your friends about it. Subscribe to my YouTube channel. Click on the wiggly bell icon, the bell icon next to subscribe. On top, there's a wiggly bell, and if you click on that, you'll be notified when I do new videos. Know that most of my videos, if not all my videos, are purely astrology. And yeah, comment, like the video if you feel so inclined, and it gives it more circulation on YouTube. And I'll leave it at that. See you guys soon.